Happy Saturday, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's the Saturday show. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napoles. Next to me, Parker behind the glass, producing. Solid little crew that we've had the last few weeks. I like it.
It's a good crew.
Alex.
Not to toot my own horn, but it's a good crew.
It is a great crew. How's your week been?
Good, man. How's yours?
It's been good.
Yeah?
It's been real good. A little slower this week than I had been in previous weeks, but it's the calm before the storm. I know Jazz preseason started last night, and we're pretty much all systems go. And if it weren't for BYU and Utah both being on bye today, we would have an incredibly packed Saturday today, but that's going to have to wait until next week until we start to see the chaos.
Well, I mean, even with Utah and BYU not having a game today and having a bye week, I mean, we still got a pretty full slate. We still got a pretty good slate of wall-to-wall coverage, as we do here on the KSL Sports Zone. Always. Yeah.
You got a specific highlight of your week?
Highlight of my week is probably going to be I'm going to throw it to high school football again yesterday. Orem is – I had the Orem game last night. Orem is such a phenomenal football team. One of the, in my opinion, competitors for that 5A championship title this season. One of the players, Iongi, had 5 touchdowns in the first half, so that was super fun to see.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you get to go out there and really witness the high school talent here in the state, because I think that's something that really flies under the radar.
Absolutely.
The amount of, like I said, talent that we have in our big high schools,
right.
And it continues to grow every single year, and you're starting to see it throughout college football and throughout even the NFL. There are so many Utah homegrown players, and I think it's really cool. Obviously, we're not quite on the level of Texas and Florida and California, but considering our population, what do we have, like 3 million people here in Utah?
Like yeah.
Considering our population, I'd say the state of Utah has a pretty decent-sized footprint in the world of football.
Dude, it's crazy because even from when I started doing high school coverage 2 years ago, the jump in talent that I've seen every year is absolutely insane. It seems like every year there's more and more potential college athletes, potential, future big stars that are coming out of Utah. And it's fun to see not only high school football here in Utah grow, but to see the talent grow and to see the talent become more apparent here in Utah. I feel like there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of good kids out there.
Oh, man. Yeah. And it's almost been exponential over the last, probably even, let's see, I graduated for reference in 2018. And so when I was in high school, East and Bingham were like the two big high schools, and Corner Canyon was kind of just starting their dominance.
Right.
I believe Jackson Dart I think he's around the same age as I am. So Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback right now, was around then. And of course, Zach Wilson was a little bit older than that. And then now it's like Corner Canyon, American Fork, Lehigh, Sky Ridge, Orem, Timpview, Lone Peak. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's like I said, man, it's awesome to see just the talent jump. It just gets better and better every year.
Yeah.
It really does.
Oh, let's see. Highlight of my week. It's October, and I love October. I fully lean into the corniness, I guess I'd say, of Halloween. I love it, and I have no shame about it either. I, got to make a yearly trip to Target with the wife and get Halloween decorations, make it spooky. It's spooky in here, by the way, in our studio. I don't know if you even noticed. We had the street team come in, and we've got some decorations around here. But anyways, I love setting up for Halloween, buying the decorations, watching the movies. So last night, my wife and I watched the OG Haunted Mansion movie with Eddie Murphy. I actually liked it. I had never seen it before.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was really good. It made me laugh. I like Eddie Murphy, so it's spooky season. Gonna be watching a ton of Halloween movies from here on out. But that's enough to start off the show, Alex. Let's get into the actual sports park. It's bye week for BYU and Utah, as we mentioned, and I want to start off with Utah, okay? First, the main point that we're going to talk about is kind of bye week, okay, it's a good time to step back and ask, are they meeting expectations? Are they performing how we thought that they would through this point? But you brought up a good point. Our friend Steve Bartle, the Utah insider for KSL Sports, he put out a nice little article yesterday kind of detailing Cam Rising's injury status, some best case, worst case scenario stuff. So I want to start off talking about that because it's a pretty serious deal. So Alex, tell us a little bit about this article that Steve wrote.
So Steve Bartle, KSL Sports Insider for the University of Utah Utes, he posted that article, as Christian's talking about, kind of detailed and talked about kind of the situation, right? It feels like we're in a deja vu situation where this is almost exactly what happened last year, right? Cam Rising and the injury and the situations. Obviously, Pete Thamel's been reporting that Cam Rising's been a week-to-week decision, a game-time decision, if you will. There were stitches for a laceration, a whole bunch of things. And so Steve Bartle says that the best-case scenario for Cam Rising is that he's made good progress, will return to practice this week, and he'll lead Utah in Tempe against Arizona State. That's best case. The likely case is that Cam Rising nearly takes the full 6 weeks to recover, and that would put him to come back at the TCU game or the Houston game for a most likely case for his return. And Christian, the worst case is that the injury is worse than we were believed, is worse than we were led on to believe, and his return probably won't happen until BYU or later.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's a difficult spot for people like Steve to be in. And we've seen it not just with the University of Utah, but I've noticed it with the Jazz too, where the local beat writers aren't the ones breaking the big stories. It's the national people. And that's a whole nother conversation about how difficult of a situation that puts those guys in. But for Steve, especially where Utah has such a loyal fan base, right, everybody wants to know. And I'm sure Steve gets bombarded a trillion times a day by people that he knows, people that know that he has connections. Hey, when is Cam going to play? Yada, yada, yada. And Steve genuinely doesn't know. Like sometimes you'll get, people who know stuff and they have to say, oh, I don't know. Like, oh, I can't say, I don't really know. But I genuinely believe Steve does not know. None of the Utah reporters and beat writers know what's going on because the program is keeping this so close to their chest.
Right.
And it's really interesting to me that the only sliver of information that we've got has been from a national insider in Pete Thamel, where he said he dislocated his finger and had a laceration that required stitches. And that's it. We haven't heard anything since. And then every Saturday we get the report. Cam Rising is questionable today.
Game time decision.
Yeah. So it's hard. And talking about the injury itself, I mean, none of us are medical professionals, right?
No.
But dislocations are tricky, especially with fingers, because there are so many tiny little ligaments there in those joints that, yeah, if you dislocate your finger, odds are you are likely tearing something in there. Whether, how severe that tear is, how much it actually matters. I mean, you can tear things up in your finger and move on with it. But as far as a quarterback, you need to be able to grip that ball to put a spiral on it. And if you can't do that, then you can't throw. So it's very interesting. And we saw there were pictures going around the other day of Cam Rising at the signing event, and he was wearing that brace that was covering two fingers.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it's a multiple finger injury. Maybe it's a buddy technique where they kind of tape the two fingers together so they, that helps stabilize it. I don't know.
Well, and then look, like you mentioned, like we're not going to pretend to be medical professionals, but I mean, when you see that picture circulating and you got the two fingers taped up, braced up like that, kind of leads you to suspect that maybe there's a little bit more to what we've been led to believe.
Right. And that's the biggest. I know in Steve's article, worst case scenario, the injury is much worse than believed.
Right.
And so obviously Steve's not going to speculate, and we're not going to speculate. But it's like, if the injury is worse than we believe, like that could mean something as bad as, it's multiple fingers that are injured.
That too, yeah. There you go.
And who knows? But
I think, look, at the end of the day, man, it's frustrating because, and it kind of leads back to that conversation I see online almost every day of why college football should start implementing mandatory injury reports and should have something along those lines where I don't even care. Like, people talk about betting and wanting to know for betting purposes, but I don't care about that. What I care about is us. What I care about is we have the responsibility to report news. We have the responsibility to accurately report news. And so prior to the Oklahoma State game, when you hear that Cam Rising is going to be playing, we're going to report that. We're going to be talking about that. And then, Isaac Wilson trots out first drive.
Yes.
And it makes us look bad. It makes the news look bad.
Right.
I think more so importantly, it's for implements of injury reports for the ability to accurately report news.
I agree 100%. And, you just look at the way the NFL does it. And I'm not saying it's the perfect way and it's the only way to do it, but the NFL, they have an injury report of, Devontae Adams out because he hurt his hamstring, right?
Right.
Missed practice because of a hamstring injury. And that's all it says. Or so-and-so questionable because of this. And just the transparency of how limited were they in practice? Did they practice at all? I think that not just Utah, okay? I don't want to put all the blame on Utah. I think most, if not every, college football program in the country has the same issue, okay?
Yeah.
I just think it's owed kind of to the fans and, like you said, to the media, especially for transparency. And it's really difficult. So with that being said, yeah, worst case scenario, Steve did a great job with this article. I'd say worst case scenario, though, is that he says that return won't happen until a BYU game or later. Worst case scenario is obviously Cam Rising never comes back, and he's getting paid NIL money to not play at all. But yeah, there is a real chance that we don't see Cam Rising again until at least the BYU game, which is scary. Now, hopefully, it's the best case scenario and where we'll see him next Friday at Arizona State. But at this point, they need him.
They do.
They do, because they really struggled last week against Arizona.
Look, man, I think, even forgetting the Cam Rising injury, those red zone drives at the beginning of the game where you're in the red zone, you're in a position to score and you can't capitalize on points.
Yeah. That
really came back to bite Utah, man.
And just the inability to, when you need something, you need points, you need a fourth down conversion, whatever, you need it. And they can't get it with Isaac Wilson under center. And that's no shade to Isaac Wilson at all. He's a freshman. He's doing his best job. But the reality is he's young. He's inexperienced. He's not supposed to be the starting quarterback right now. That was not the plan.
Right.
So I don't want to put that on his shoulders, but it's the fact of the matter is Cam Rising is supposed to be Utah's starting quarterback every single week. Cam Rising is supposed to be out there leading the University of Utah to the top of the Big 12. They had all this preseason hype and yada, yada, yada. And so far throughout 5 games, I know they're 4-1, but it feels a lot worse than the record is because of everything else that's gone on.
And to answer the question you had earlier, Christian, with is Utah meeting expectations? Even though, yes, the Arizona loss stings. Yes, you lose at home to, in a conference game, in a night game, but I still think Utah's meeting expectations.
Yeah, and
I had them at my preseason prediction. I had Utah going 11-1. So right now they're on schedule for what I thought they were going to do.
I think if you told anybody, preseason, Utah would be at the bye week at 4-1. I don't think anybody would have had a problem with that because people knew Oklahoma State was supposed to be a really good team.
Yep.
Arizona was also supposed to be probably competing for the Big 12 championship. Those are 2 really tough teams. And so, again, people were kind of looking at this bye week and saying, yeah, if you go 4-1 and you're in that bye with only one loss, you're in good shape. And the fact of the matter is that is the truth for the University of Utah.
And let's reiterate for Utah fans, it's not over.
No.
The season is far from over. Yes, the loss stings. Yes, it sucks losing at home. But there's still so much to play. This Big 12 is so competitive and so good and so evenly matched across a lot of aspects for a lot of teams. It's far from over. Utah still has a really good shot at potentially making it to that Big 12 game. They just have to clean up that offense, man.
Yeah, and looking at their schedule coming up, I mean, Arizona State again on Friday, like I said. That should be a good get-back game, a good bounce-back game. And then they host TCU, who just got smacked, by the way, last night.
To Houston.
To Houston, who was supposed to be one of the worst teams in the conference. Houston had not scored.
Not just in the conference.
In the country.
In the entire FBS level.
Houston beat TCU last night 30-19. Houston had not scored a single point in their previous 2 weeks.
That's crazy.
So... anyways, yeah, so it's at Arizona State, at home against TCU, and then at Houston. So 2 awful teams back-to-back. And then a mediocre or mid team, as we like to say, before those awful teams. And then another bye before you host BYU.
Which, by the way, that BYU game just got a whole lot bigger.
It did, and it has continued to grow and grow, and it feels like after BYU's win over Baylor, the stakes are high.
Incredibly high.
And there is a lot of talk about, is this going to be the biggest that this game has ever been, as far as implication-wise for conference championship and stuff like that. And it definitely has a potential. I think it's very early. It's way too early to be talking about it like that. But, you know, if Utah still only has one loss going into that game and BYU is undefeated or also has one loss going into that game, there's a real chance that that's the biggest that game has ever been.
And it's going to be fun.
And just thinking about the fact that we haven't had it in a couple years and they haven't been in the same conference for so long, but now they are, it's going to be crazy.
BYU is surprised. Yes, there's still a little rough moments, but I mean, hey, you're 5-0. Heading into Big 12 play, you're 2-0, sitting at the top of the conference. BYU, man, oof.
And I think the most surprising thing about BYU, aside from their record, is the fact that we've seen them win games in so many different ways. You know, you look at teams like Texas Tech, and it's like, okay, they win games because they're shootouts, and their offense can put up a bunch of points, but their defense can't stop anybody. So you know that if you can somehow slow down that offense, you're going to win the game. BYU, okay, they beat SMU in a very low-scoring game. They beat Kansas State in an all-around butt-kicking. And then they beat Baylor in a game where there was a lot of adversity. It was kind of fun because we were here for the first half, basically, and kind of doing live.
Right.
But the second half, BYU got stagnant. And Baylor came back, and it looked like Baylor was maybe going to have a chance to win. And through all that adversity, BYU's defense stepped up, forced an interception to close the game out.
And in those situations, you just got to remember, you have to keep your foot on the gas. Yes, you're up, and you know, maybe obviously, you know, you got to play a little bit more conservative to try to hold on to that lead you have, but don't get too conservative. Keep your foot on the gas and keep continuing to build that lead, especially in that third quarter. Once you get to the fourth, maybe we talk about getting a little bit more conservative, but BYU were in full control at Baylor and allowed Baylor to grow back into the game, man.
Yeah. Again, though, the encouraging thing to me is you can't win anything in football especially, without going through some sort of adversity.
Right.
And just proving that you have the mental fortitude, the strong will as a team to bend but not break and to make plays when it matters. I mean, that's all you can ask for especially from a team like BYU that was supposed to not be very good.
Yeah.
And here they are shocking us all. So,
well, and to answer your question from earlier, Christian, is BYU meeting expectations? I would say no. They're exceeding expectations.
Okay, I was going to say what?
Because if we were having the conversation, go back to a few months ago, we were talking about how BYU needed to be bowl eligible. That was the goal. 6-6 or better was the goal. Now we're talking about a 5-0 BYU. They are exceeding expectations and I think surprising a lot of people along the way.
Yeah, and it's a BYU team that hasn't really been at full strength yet. Every week they've dealt with injuries to the running back room. And to tell you the truth, Alex, I don't know if they're ever going to put it together as far as with the leading rusher. I mean, Jake Retzlaff led the team with 53 yards on 6 carries against Baylor. Enoch Nawahine got 19 carries, turned that into 51 yards, but that's only 2.7 per. And then LJ Martin, Hinckley Rapati, been dealing with injuries of their own, so I don't think that BYU is going to have a lead back stepping up throughout this year, but so far they've been able to deal with that with Jake Retzlaff's legs and then with the use of some of their receivers in the short game. Darius Lassiter, of course, led the Cougars with 120 yards against Baylor, 1 touchdown. So it's been really encouraging to see that sort of performance from that offense. But again, like if you would have told me that BYU was going into the bye 5-0, I'd be like, that's kind of crazy, right?
Exactly. Like I said, we thought the goal was 6-6. We thought the goal was bowl eligible, but now, hey, when you're sitting at 5-0 and you're 2-0 in the conference, reach for the stars, man.
Yeah,
go for it. Go all in. Do what you got to do to make sure that you're playing in that Big 12 championship game.
So now the question is, I mean, we sort of have to readjust our expectations for BYU this season. Now, how high do we set those expectations, right? Because the goal going into the year was, okay, just get to a bowl game and we'll be happy. Now you're 1 win away from that, and I know that wins are really hard to come by. And again, a point that we've hammered so much on this show is like look back to last year, how close they were, and they were never able to get there. So I don't want to jump the gun, but how many wins do you think is realistic for BYU this year?
I still believe that BYU, they still have some tests on that schedule. I mean, you look at next week against Arizona. Arizona just came to Salt Lake City and beat Utah at home. Now you got and beat them good. And now you head over to now you have Arizona coming up to Provo. I think that will be a tough contest and a big test for BYU. After that, you have Oklahoma State come into Provo, and I think Oklahoma State still has a lot of questions to answer, but it's still going to be a tough game. And then after that, you go to UCF before you hit another bye week, and then you have the game at Utah. Yeah. There's still a lot of tests on this BYU schedule. However, I could see BYU winning 10.
Well, and after that Utah game, I mean, you have Kansas, at home against Kansas, at Arizona State, and then at home against Houston to wrap up the season. So those are 2 gimmies, and then another game that should be a pretty easy win, right?
Right.
So let's say BYU maybe drops one of Arizona and Oklahoma State. Let's say they drop one of UCF or Utah, and then 3 more wins to close out the season. That's 5 wins right there, yeah.
10-2.
It's definitely, and that's, I'd say that's very, very conservative. That's giving the opponents the benefit of the doubt in this situation. Right. Because Oklahoma State has not looked very good.
Like I said, they still have a lot of questions to answer. It's gonna be a good test for both teams, right? For BYU and for Oklahoma State. But now with what we've seen from BYU and now from their ability to ride that defense to win games, I feel a lot more confident in saying BYU can very well hit 9 wins, 10 wins, compared to where we were about a month and a half ago.
Oh yeah, it's very, very exciting for BYU right now, and man, November 9th. Can't get here soon
enough, man. That game, if things continue to work out the way that we're looking at it and the way we're projecting it, that game on November 9th is going to be massive.
Yeah.
Absolutely massive. For both sides.
Even, and I don't really have rooting interest in either side, but as far as for us and here at the station and how much fun that's going to be for our jobs, if it's such a high stakes game, oh my goodness. But I guess to sum that all up, Alex, we'd say Utah has met expectations so far. BYU has exceeded expectations so far. And I know, especially looking at Utah, it was a very tough loss. It's a tough pill to swallow. But the fact of the matter is, do not panic.
Exactly. And before we wrap up the segment, Christian, I know, like I said, the loss sucks. It sucks. It stings. However, on the positive side, and to give it a little bit of a positive twist, I believe that this experience for Isaac Wilson will pay off dividends come junior year, senior year for Isaac Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, if he's looking this way right now, considering the fact that he's probably not getting all the first team reps, I don't know what the situation's like at practice. Going back to the injury report, it would be helpful to have that to know who's getting what reps with the first team. Just imagine how much better Isaac Wilson's going to be as a sophomore after, a whole other offseason of experience, but then also getting every single first team rep. That would be.
He's shown signs, man. He's shown signs of that he has the ability to be extremely successful. And I mean, obviously, as Utah fans are going to want Cam Rising out there to be playing, obviously leading this team, but there's a lot of positive in allowing a true freshman to learn, to grow, to be in these situations for, again, paying off down the line. It's really valuable experience for Isaac Wilson at the moment.
1,000%. All right, we are up against it. We got to take a break. On the other side of the break, let's talk some NFL, Alex. We had an incredibly exciting Thursday night football game, and then we've got a big slate of games coming up tomorrow, so I want to talk about that, and then trade rumors flying around. Can't wait to get into it. So, again, that's coming up on the other side. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Thanks for listening. Christian Esparza here, Alex Napoles next to me. I want to remind you, though, the Utah Hockey Club is playing its first ever home game, and the KSL Sports Zone wants to send you to the game. Listen on Tuesday, October 8th during Hans and Scotty to win. Tune in at 2 p.m. to the interview with Utah Hockey Club GM Bill Armstrong. You're going to listen for the keyword Keller, and then be caller number 12. Once you hear that keyword Keller, if you are caller number 12, you'll win a pair of tickets to see the Utah Hockey Club versus the Chicago Blackhawks at Delta Center on October 8th. Again, listen to the KSL Sports Zone, the radio home of the Utah Hockey Club, Tuesday, October 8th, for your chance to win. That's exciting, Alex, because those tickets are hard to come by.
Yeah. It's very exciting, and we'll talk about, the festivities and the party later on, but Utah's rolling out the red carpet, man. The yes. Staff over at the Delta Center, they have a concert going on. ESPN's going to be out here. It's going to be massive inaugural game for the Utah Hockey Club.
It's a crazy couple of weeks here in Salt Lake City. We haven't even mentioned UFC. I mean, we gave away UFC tickets to the big event tonight, and that is huge. It's awesome to see, big brands like the UFC recognizing Salt Lake City and saying, hey, that's a market that we can have success in. And the fact that they wanted to come back and do it again after successfully doing it last year, so big. And oh, man, I'm so excited for Tuesday night. That's going to be huge.
It's going to be a legendary night, man. It
really is.
It's going to be one that I hope the players, feel the energy and feel the excitement that the fans, the people of Utah have for this team coming over and debuting in the NHL.
So, again, listen to Hanson Scotty, 2 p.m. on Tuesday, October 8th, for the keyword Keller. And once you hear that keyword, you will want to be caller number 12 for your chance to win. All right, Alex, let's talk NFL. Geez, we had an amazing Thursday night football game, and that's something that we don't get to say very often because it's kind of become a running joke that Thursday night football games have been awful.
Yeah.
It's hard. You're asking these players to play Sunday, have a couple days of rest, and then play Thursday again in a physically taxing game where it's hard to do that. And man, the Buccaneers and the Falcons delivered. Ultimately, Atlanta came out on top. Overtime thriller, 36-30 was the final. Kirk Cousins broke the Atlanta Falcons single-game passing record with 509 yards. This is the same Kirk Cousins who, after week 1, I was questioning how long he was going to play because it looked like he couldn't even move around in the pocket.
And it's also funny that he broke the record on Matt Ryan night.
Yes, the Falcons inducted Matt Ryan into their Ring of Honor or whatever they call it on Thursday night. So Matt Ryan, of course, the longtime Falcon, he won the MVP. He led the Falcons to the Super Bowl that they ended up losing. But that is funny, kind of right in his face for Kirk O'Chains to, 509 yards is insane.
4 touchdowns. Drake London bringing in 154 yards in that one.
That's true. It is true. And part of that speaks to the ineffectiveness of the ground game. They couldn't move. I mean, Bijan Robinson had one really nice carry, but other than that, he was largely ineffective. And even Tyler Algier, he had some touches as well. But, man, Vita Vea and that Bucs defensive line is tough to move the ball against. So
they looked good.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with that defensive line for the Bucs. And Christian, honestly, this game came down to that fumble in the fourth quarter.
Oh, it was huge.
Up until this point, the Atlanta defense did not have the ability to contain that Bucs offense. Baker Mayfield also had a really good night. The run game was also looked good. Mike Evans, I believe, brought in 2 touchdowns in this one.
Yep.
Like, that Bucs offense was firing on all cylinders, and basically they had a chance to run out the clock and just kind of end the game, finish the game there. And Bucs were that close to winning, but then a fumble came in, recovered by the Falcons. I mean, Kirk Cousins threw an interception on the next play, or on the next drive, but then somehow Atlanta ends up with the ball again, and they regain that momentum to march down the field, score that field goal, and force overtime.
Yeah, the Buccaneers definitely shot themselves in the foot. They had the 30-27 lead. They were executing the 4-minute offense almost perfectly. Yeah. They got into Atlanta territory. It looked like they were ready to just milk the clock, put some more points up on the board. Rookie running back Bucky Irving fumbled the ball. And you're right, Kirk did throw an interception the next play, and the Bucs had a chance to really close the game out, then drive-killing penalties, man. They were forced to punt it, gave the Falcons a chance, and that's all they needed. So, oh, man, what an exciting – and it was a division matchup, too. I love watching division games because they mean a little more, you know. There's something extra in there. But let's move on to some other NFL news. Davante Adams, of course, one of the best receivers in the league, still trade rumors. He has requested to be traded out of Las Vegas. And then yesterday, what does he post to his Instagram story? A picture of Edgar Allan Poe. Do you know why that's relevant, Alex?
Why is that relevant, Christian?
Edgar Allan Poe, the famous poet, has a pretty well-known poem called The Raven.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be something?
Dude, if he joins the Ravens, watch out for that offense, man. You add one of the top receivers in the league to that Ravens offense.
Yep.
Him and Lamar Jackson are going to be running around the AFC.
Just imagine if Baltimore would have acquired Derrick Henry and Davante Adams 3 years ago. That's what's going through my mind. Is like, yeah, that would be cool now, where Derrick Henry and Davante Adams both are at the tail end of their careers. But imagine if they would have done that 3 years ago when, you know.
All that just to lose to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, and that's true. That's true, too. Somehow, some way, it's going to happen. Yeah, Parker, the Chiefs fan, pumping his fist in the studio. You've got it lucky, man.
Davante Adams would be phenomenal at the Ravens. A lot of talk about him still fans wanting him to go to the Jets.
Yeah.
Link up there with Aaron Rodgers. Derek Carr has come out and stated that he would love to link up again with Davante Adams. So, I mean, options are there for Adams to land somewhere and potentially. I think at the end of the day, man, he wants a ring. He wants a championship before he calls it a career. And so for him, it's obviously finding the right fit and finding out who's going to help him get to that ring faster.
Well, yeah, and it is funny. I mean, college teammates, right? Derek Carr and Davante Adams, Fresno State, it was, I believe.
Yes.
And then they linked up. I mean, that's the reason why Davante Adams went to Las Vegas to be with Derek Carr. They were together for a year. Davante Adams led the NFL in touchdowns, so it clearly worked. But then the Raiders traded Derek Carr away. And then he's got the ties to Aaron Rodgers in New York. And it's funny because you say he probably wants to win a ring. Well, and if that's the case, it's Baltimore or bust. Because you're not going to win a ring in New York. I don't care how close you are with Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett is one of the worst offensive coordinators in football. The only reason he's employed is because he's buddies with Aaron Rodgers for some reason. I wouldn't even think that Aaron Rodgers could tolerate him because he's kind of a weird guy. But, I mean, that Jets offense stinks. And they have Garrett Wilson. They have Breece Hall. Aaron Rodgers has looked fine, but they just – I don't really know if it's Nathaniel Hackett's fault or something else, but I don't see Davante Adams helping the Jets a whole lot.
There was really high expectations for Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall coming into the season, and honestly, they've kind of been underwhelming.
Yeah.
I'll give credit to Aaron Rodgers because, I mean, coming back from that injury, he's looked good.
At his age, yeah. He has looked really good.
But Garrett Wilson, who's probably wide receiver number one for that offense, and obviously Breece Hall, who's one of the best running backs in this league, they've looked underwhelming, man.
Yeah,
haven't really liked what I've seen from them.
They
so
can't
far.
get points.
Right.
They can't finish drives for whatever reason, and it's tough because that defense is really good, and there's no doubt about that. So it's very frustrating to watch an offense that can't put up points, and then to watch a defense that keeps it a low-scoring game. It's very frustrating. So we'll see the Jets tomorrow morning in London taking on the Vikings. I love the London games, by the way. I think they're so much fun to watch because that's, wake up about probably 7:30, 8. Wake up, put the TV on, put the telly on, watch some football immediately right out of bed. Oh, man, there ain't nothing like it.
Vikings, man.
Oh,
How about the Minnesota Vikings? I owe Sam Darnold an apology.
Wow.
I said Sam Darnold, prior to the season starting, was not going to be good.
Yeah.
I worried for guys like Jay Jettas, who, is obviously a phenomenal receiver, but wasn't too confident in their quarterback play. And Sam Darnold has silenced the critics. He has looked phenomenal through 4 weeks.
Oh, my gosh. Does he still lead the league in passing touchdowns? I think he does.
I think he does, yes.
And Kevin O'Connell, the head coach in Minnesota, has just done a great job. Even looking last year, they lost Kirk Cousins to his Achilles tear, and then they rolled out, I think, 4 or 5 other quarterbacks throughout the course of that season. That's right. And they easily could have fallen apart and become one of the worst teams in the league. And they weren't great by any means, but they did a really good job of not just rolling over and dying. So, yeah, Sam Darnold on kind of I don't want to say second leg of his career because it's more than that. He had some stops in with the Panthers and the 49ers, but I don't think he's the long-term solution in Minnesota because they did just draft J.J. McCarthy, who happened to bust up his knee, so he's out for the year.
Right.
Whatever happens after this year for Sam Darnold, though, I think he's going to get a shot to go start somewhere else, maybe like New York or something.
Or does Minnesota decide, hey, you did well enough, let's invest and keep him around? He's only on that 1-year deal for Minnesota, but, I mean, that's also on the table if Minnesota decides to take that route.
And that's a really interesting conversation to have because it's working.
Yeah.
And obviously it's only been 4 games or whatever, so who knows how long it's going to work across the 17-game season. But, I mean, if the Vikings win that division and if they win a playoff game or 2, and if I'm there in Minnesota's front office, it's like, why would you want to, make that change just because you drafted somebody in the first round?
Mm-hmm.
So that could put Minnesota in a tough spot, but we'll see. Again, Vikings, Jets tomorrow morning in London. Another game that I have scheduled, Alex, is the Bills and Texans. Two really fun teams in the AFC.
That's going to be a good one.
The Bills are coming off an ugly loss to the Ravens. The Texans, of course, are 3-1 as well. But an interesting subplot for this game is a Stephon Diggs sort of revenge game, even though, it's not like Buffalo did him dirty. He's the one that wanted out. But I always like looking inside the mind of receivers and corners, especially, because they always have ego, and it works. I mean, they need it. Like my wife was joking to me the other day. She's like, I saw a video of Devontae Adams ranking his best receivers in the league, and he put himself at number 1. And I was like, well, if you ask any receiver or corner who the best in the league at that position, they'll put themselves number 1.
Yeah.
That's just the mentality they have.
It'll be interesting to see what Stephon Diggs is able to do against his former team, right? There was, the fallout in the offseason, the trade. Houston, I think, has looked good to start the season. High expectations for this Houston-Texas side. And then you look at Buffalo, their offense, despite losing all those receivers, despite losing Gabe Davis, despite losing Stephon Diggs, despite losing, whoever else they lost this offseason, they've still looked good. And credit to Josh Allen for doing this receiving by committee is what they're calling it. They're spreading out the ball. And their receivers are making plays. And Buffalo, despite losing last week to Baltimore, they've still looked good to start the year.
Yeah, they had that one tough game. I mean, they really did struggle last week. But receiving on the year, Khalil Shakir, he's out tomorrow, by the way, so that's a big blow. But he's their leading. He has the most catches, 18 catches for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then you got Dalton Kincaid, 13 catches. Keon Coleman, the rookie, 8 catches. James Cook, 9 catches. Curtis Samuel with 8. So they really do spread the ball around. And then, of course, Josh is always a threat to tuck it and carry and run over your best defenders.
Yeah.
So the Bills by far have been my, I think, surprise team, either the Bills or Vikings. And they're both doing really, really good. And I can't wait to watch them tomorrow. But, man, the Texans have really kind of come out of nowhere, and I think they're doing great things. Stephon Diggs is phenomenal. Nico Collins, all of a sudden one of the best receivers in the NFL. C.J. Stroud doing his thing behind center. So can't wait to watch these young teams get together and put on a showdown.
Tomorrow, 11 a.m. And CJ, like you mentioned, C.J. Stroud, second year in the league, and he's already looking like one of the best quarterbacks in this league. C.J. has been, I think, incredibly impressive. But another quarterback who's been incredibly impressive, we got to talk about Jaden Daniels, man.
Oh yeah, the Commanders. Where did this come from? I mean, I thought that Jaden Daniels was going to the worst situation of any of the rookie quarterbacks. As far as we don't really know how Dan Quinn was going to be as a head coach, right? Their line isn't great. Terry McLaurin is a good receiver, but behind them they don't have anything. But man, the Commanders are 3-1. Jaden Daniels has put together some really impressive games. I mean, going back to their, a Monday Night Football game?
Yeah,
he completed like 93% of his passes, and they didn't punt across a 2-game stretch. That is phenomenal. Nobody does that, let alone rookie quarterbacks. So Jaden Daniels, props to him. By far the rookie of the year so far through the first quarter of the season.
No doubt. Jaden Daniels has been really great. Little slow start to the season, losing to the Bucs week 1, but I mean, a good bounce back to the Giants. Really big win against the Bengals, and then another good performance against the Cardinals. So I'm interested to see how they follow it up this week against the Browns.
Yep. Let's see. There was one more team I wanted to touch on really quickly. Great radio here. Oh, I just wanted to mention Jordan Love made his return last week.
Yeah.
Obviously, they struggled against the Vikings. They lost. Well, they came back. They made it a close game at the end, but the first 3 quarters were not close. But Jordan Love, after hurting his knee, good to see him back, slinging it, healthy. big game tomorrow against the Rams for the Packers, and the Rams have injuries of their own, so Jordan Love should be able to really let it fly. But really happy to see him back.
Absolutely. Good to see him back. I thought he played well, even after bouncing back and trying to mount that comeback. Just super, super happy for him that injury wasn't more serious and more severe, because it did look for a second there that there was going to be potentially more time. But again, good to see him back, and a really good opportunity to bounce back and get a win against the Rams on tomorrow night.
Coming up next, let's get into some technical fouls. Alex, you're hearing about a potential mutiny in the northeastern United States. We'll touch more on that next. This is the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's the Saturday Show, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I'm Christian Esparza, Alex Napoles. Next to me, it's time for Technical Fouls. If you are unfamiliar, this is one of our segments where we like to get a little goofy, talk about some of the sillier things in the sports world, because they are games after all. And it's important to take these things lightheartedly and find the joy, find the fun, and the silly side of things. So, Alex, tell us about this mutiny that you're hearing about.
So my technical foul for the week will stay in New England, we'll stay in the NFL, and we'll head up to New England. The Patriots insider Evan Lazar said that the Patriots are teetering on a mutiny in his latest podcast. But actually, you know what? Let's hear the clip first. There's an audio clip to go along with it. This is Evan Lazar, Patriots insider, talking on his podcast about the situation inside the Patriots locker room.
Right now, they're teetering on mutiny in that locker room. And I don't want to be alarmist or like what's the word? I don't want to
hyperbolic.
Hyperbolic. Thank you. I don't. But I was in that locker room after the game on Sunday. The defense is mad at the defense. The offense is mad at the offense. You have young receivers who are literally throwing tantrums on film, and Pop Douglas and Jalen Polk, and good on Pop Douglas for owning that this week and walking, kind of saying that he's got to be better and all that kind of stuff. But
it's what is happening in New England, man. And that's not even the worst part. The technical foul is going to go to the New England Patriots and their PR communication staff, because as soon as that aired and it hit Twitter and that clip went viral of Lazar talking about the mutiny, New England went through and scrubbed the existence of him ever saying that. You go back to the podcast and it's gone. The recordings on the Patriots website it's scrubbed away.
So he's a reporter for the team.
Yes, yeah, he's an insider for the team. He's employed by the team, and his podcast is hosted on the New England Patriots website. So their personal reporter, their in-house reporter, said this on the podcast that goes on the New England Patriots website, and the Patriots did everything in their power to make sure that this clip is scrubbed off the internet because they didn't like the way he was talking about the team.
That's crazy.
Crazy stuff.
That's, let alone the situation itself is crazy. It's only 4 games into the season. But things can get out of hand quickly. These are grown men. These are some of the best athletes in the world. And if they're not performing how they believe they should be performing, tempers are going to run high.
And to make matters even worse, Christian, later on in the afternoon, Lazar goes on a local radio station, Sports Talk, just like us, and says, I may have over-exaggerated the situation. so even the reporter doubles back and says, I got caught up in the moment. I shouldn't have used that word. My bad. Again, because I think the New England Patriots is like, hey, man, you got to make this right.
Do you think that he was told to say that?
I think so. Especially because they went through and scrubbed that. You go back and find the podcast on their website, and you go to the part where he says the mutiny, and it's gone. It's not in there anymore. They scrubbed that part from the recording. They deleted that recording, or that segment is edited out if you go back and listen to it.
So not only they didn't just take the segment down, they actually just clipped out that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really funny.
And
I may have exaggerated.
It's so interesting to hear him go back and kind of double down later on and kind of come back and be like, hey, I probably shouldn't have said that on a local radio station. Kind of tried to make him situation right. Says he got a little carried away in the heat of the moment, and so went on radio and apologized.
What is going on in New England? That's awesome. That's a great one. For mine, I'm going to go with I don't know who to give the technical foul to, so we'll talk about it and then decide who to assess the penalty to. Antonio Pierce, Raiders head coach, was hit by the NCAA with an 8-year show cause for recruiting violations. Turns out he took recruits' parents to a quote-unquote gentleman's club. While he was at ASU, and that's what the recruiting violation was. So, Alex, let's put our heads together and decide, does Antonio Pierce get the technical foul, or does the NCAA get the technical foul for still giving out recruiting violations? Because everybody does that. Like, everybody broke recruiting rules before NIL was a thing. And I'm not saying everybody was going out to clubs like this, but, there's kind of a well-known thing is things happen under the table all the time. And the NCAA kind of gets to pick and choose when to single out schools and say, okay, you're going to get in trouble for this. So do they get the technical foul or Antonio Pierce?
It is interesting that now that Antonio Pierce is head coach of the Raiders and he's miles away from the NCAA and nowhere near college football, is when they finally decide to come out and be like, hey, you know what? We're going to punish you.
Yeah.
So in that case, I would like to give the technical foul to the NCAA, but I also will give it to both because Antonio Pierce, I mean, yes, everybody does something with recruiting, but at the end of the day, you got caught.
Well, and any time I can point fingers at the Raiders and laugh at them, I will, right? But Pierce has been with the Raiders since 2022, so it's been 3 years since he was at Arizona State. So it is a little weird and random that this is kind of out of the blue, and they're just like, hey, 8-year show cause. Like, yeah, so, okay, let's split it. Maybe they'll both get a technical foul, I guess, the NCAA and Antonio Pierce.
They both got one.
For recruiting violations. Oh, man. Can't do anything.
How about UCLA and Penn State still tied up at 0-0 with late into the second quarter, but Penn State knocking on that end zone?
Yeah, this should be a fun game. Game day has been on it today. I mean, off air we were talking about some of the funny things that we heard Nick Saban say to Marshawn Lynch. Marshawn Lynch is never going to live that down for as long as he lives.
Nope.
That's great. But coming up next, Alex, let's talk some Utah Jazz. They had media day last week. They had their first preseason game last night. They're starting their season up here soon, so I can't wait to talk about the Jazz. Let's do it on the other side of this break. This is the Saturday Show 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.